business tonight. We give you a welcome that hopefully is more than words. Hopefully you've been treated well, and I want us as members always to be on the lookout for unfamiliar faces, those that maybe we haven't met, and whether they are true visitors, first time, or regular visitors, or members that we just haven't made the acquaintance of. Let's be friendly. Let's convey a spirit of true joy and love in the name and because of Christ. Let me mention that next Sunday night, Lord willing, Stephen Russell will be preaching. You'll be hearing Stephen once a month and Doyle once a month on average, and that's unless there's sickness or maybe some other things there. But Stephen's schedule a little bit more fluid, not a set Sunday night of the month. I think Doyle's going to try to take most of the first Sunday mornings, but he'll have a great lesson. It'll be a great time to invite someone to come out and be our guest for next Sunday night. Now, this coming Saturday, men, our quarterly breakfast. I hope you've signed that list up already. Bring someone with you. If you are a man here and you've been here some time, or certainly one of our newer members, come out and see what it's about. If you like food, I think isn't that kind of a qualification for being a man? You know, you'll enjoy that, and we have great cooks, and they do a super job. So looking forward to those. Looking at a lesson entitled Happy Homes tonight. Happy homes. You see each other, anybody in that picture? I didn't try to look in your family tree and pick out anything that would incriminate anyone. Interesting to study the older pictures. I'm enjoying seeing you smile up there at that. Is it the case, and I'm asking, I don't expect all of you to answer at once, didn't they used to have folks have just kind of a frozen expression, almost a frown, because of the way the camera developed? And so if you're smiling, they don't want to mess it up. So you need to be as still as you can and stiff. But you know, you kind of wonder, were those folks really happy? Is that the manifestation of what we would like for our homes to be? Imagine that growing family there, probably one on the way. Incidentally, if you take that next year, there'll be another little head in the picture. And so large families, and the goal, hopefully the objective for us is to have happy homes, whatever generation we are in. A lot of the modern pictures taken now, if you can get our heads out of an iPhone or an iPad or something, there may be a fake plastered smile. We're wearing our nice designer clothes, and everyone in the picture has the semblance of joy, but as soon as that picture is snapped, we go off into our own private existence, maybe barely covering the pain and the shame of some things that we're doing that they really don't contribute to a happy home at all. Interesting that reading in Isaiah chapter 32, happy homes. This is a Bible topic, a Bible title even. Happy homes in the joyous city, peaceful habitation, secure dwellings, quiet resting places. You know, a lot of people in the world are longing for that. There's some in this assembly tonight that haven't had that as an experience. You grew up in a very hostile environment. There are some of you, and some of you, I don't even know who you are. May never know this about you, but you bear a pain that maybe dozens of us together collectively couldn't even relate to. Our experiences in a bad way about family don't even touch yours. And many of you struggle with that. It's an ongoing issue for you to find happiness, to manifest that in your current home environment. Others are very joyful in spite of, not because of maybe your upbringing. But I hope and pray as we think about happy homes, we'll look at God's ideal. We'll look at a standard that I never want us to diminish as we think about it. You look in some of our Brotherhood periodicals, some of these names may not be familiar to you, but Spiritual Sword in the January of this year edition, Can We Save Our Children? Great topics about just fundamental things. A concern about our families. The Gospel Advocate, I think this was November of last year, Mom, Dad, and the Kids. A lot of articles about that. Just about any periodical you would put your hands on over time. In fact, within just a few months, it's going to have an article, going to have some special series devoted to our home and family relationships. We're not isolated in this area, not isolated even in our country, with families who are struggling. You know what, as we think about the church and how we can kind of regroup, and instead of being in a stagnant state, let's progress. Let's get the fires of evangelism lit again. Let's be servant-minded more than we ever have, and hopefully with that see an increase in numbers. one reason, I'm not an expert, not trying to dispense, just professional advice. One reason I think a lot of our congregations maybe are struggling and aren't as effective and active as we should be is many of our home units aren't strong. With the lack of stability there, it's really hard to get motivated to do much else than just kind of take care of things. Sometimes it's putting out fires in the home front. We have little other time or energy to expend on anything close to a church setting. A lot of times as we're talking to families, you realize even in a church environment, there are some who are struggling, don't know what it's like. They're in danger of being the next generation to pass on the dysfunction and the pain that they've had there. And so what we're asking is not the impossible, because God doesn't ask that of us, but to have hopefully a happier, a more blessed and functioning home than maybe we've had before. There was a study done some years back. Jonathan Edwards, well-known preacher, and a guy by the name of Max Jukes. Interesting, in the article that I've seen, he's just kind of labeled a sinner. You know what? Just kind of one of those general guys that wasn't a good fella. But they studied these men and their families, several generations of them. In fact, I'll give you, I can't remember if I did a paper outline. I'll get some of this for you later if you'd like to see it. But Jonathan Edwards, he's the good guy here, okay? 1,500 descendants traced to him. Of that number, 78 college and university presidents, 100 preachers, 75 Army and Navy officers, 60 doctors, 30 judges, 1 vice president. Of the 1,500 in his family, traceable only 1 criminal. That's an amazing record. That would be almost unheard of. I can't imagine hardly any other family being able to say over those generations, with that multitude of folks, we've got these numbers to be proud of. Now, Max Jukes, on the other hand, 1,200 descendants traced to him. If I remember, they lived about the same period of time. Max Jukes' claim to fame among those generations, 300 thieves and murderers, 100 or more spent time in jail at some period in their lives, 100 drunkards, 90 prostitutes, no proof of even one of the 1,200 being a productive, valuable citizen in society. Now, which of those two families if you had a choice, would you be born into? Would you go for Jonathan Edwards or Max Jukes? It'd be nice to say, hey, I wish I could be a part of that family. But you know what? Often healthy and strong, vibrant families will give rise to another generation. I wish I could tell you it always works that way. Obviously it doesn't. You don't even see that in the Bible. But the surest way that we can have harmony and have a sense of wellness is to make sure that in this family unit I have control over. I am doing what I can to ensure it. You think that with Max Jukes' family on the other end, if someone could have just said, you know what, I'm tired of this. I don't like the legacy that's been handed down to me. I can't change my parents. If I know them, I can't change my grandparents. But I'm going to be the one to put a stop to it. And whatever family that comes from me will be better. It's just even with that ideal for that to come to pass. I'm thankful that many of you have broken the cycle and will continue that with the help of God. There was a survey done in 2005 that is nearing, and I guess maybe right at 10 years old. It was by the American Community Society or Survey. They looked at I think it's 111 million U.S. households at the time. That number's changed a little bit. We're, I think, higher probably would be than a decade ago. This was kind of the year in which there was a tipping point. They found that, again, of the households here in America at the current time, 50.2%, just over the halfway mark, were single parents and or unmarrieds heading up those households. That left 49.8% that would be what you'd call the traditional family with married couples in them. And they broke that down. You know, prior to that, in American history at least, you had a majority, you had way more, in many cases, than 50% of the traditional homes, mom and dad, the kids. And so with that change, they also looked at the non-traditional families and found that 9% were headed by single fathers, 25% by single mothers, 66% were of adults that were cohabitating. That represented a third of all the houses 10 years ago. If anything has changed, I would assume that maybe those numbers are up, and probably that tipping point, that balance, is still increasing in favor of the non-traditional households. Now, we're not saying, hey, if I'm a member of one of those households, that it's my fault or somehow that our whole family is doomed or anything like that. Oh, no. But the idea that so many in America feel that is a very natural thing. Wouldn't be at all unthinkable to realize, say, no matter what kind of family you're in, as long as there's love and as long as you got a roof over your head, you're okay. Here's what I want us to do. We're going to take God's word. We're going to look at some passages that speak of in a home setting. First of all, marriage. We'll get into parenting and children. But does the Bible really hold out the hope and the expectation that I could have a marriage? I could be a husband or a wife and find joy in that relationship. Sanjay and I have been married a few years, and we had a good friend there in Fayette, Alabama. Her sister got married. And we visited their house or apartment. I don't remember a lot of details. Here's what I remember about that visit. It might have been in Birmingham, Alabama. They're newlyweds. We're fairly newlyweds. The husband, and this again is the sister of the sister who's our friend. The husband had taught their dog, I started to say a neat trick. It wasn't a neat trick at all. Here's what he taught him to do. He would ask the dog a question. Would you rather be a married man or a dead dog? And you know what the dog did? Fell down the floor. Would you rather be a married man or a dead dog? And the dog falls down, appearance of dead. Now, to him, that was funny. Everybody laughed, but you know what's not so funny? Marriage didn't last either. And maybe even that sentiment of, hey, this is not a valuable thing. Maybe this is just kind of one of those throwaway relationships. You wonder about that. And you look at that in terms of Isaiah chapter 62. Our reading was from Isaiah. This is a little bit later. And in the context of this great book, there is hope held out for Israel. Captivity is a reality, but there are better days. God is holding out hope for his people. Really in the short term, but also in the long term with the coming of Jesus and some promises about that. But listen to what he says in Isaiah 62, 4 and 5. You shall no longer be termed forsaken, nor shall your land anymore be termed desolate, but you shall be called Hephzibah, and your land Beulah. For the Lord delights in you. That's what Hephzibah means, delights in you. And your land shall be merry. That's what Beulah is. When we sing the song Beulah Land. In fact, there are a couple of different ones that I'm thinking of that have that in the title there, Beulah, married. And so the whole country, the whole nation is viewed as kind of desolate. There's no joy here. God says, I'm going to restore that. I will be your husband again. There will be a joy. And notice the comparison here. Starting in verse 5, for as a young man marries a virgin, so shall your sons marry you. And as the bridegroom rejoices over the bride, so shall your God rejoice over you. As the bridegroom rejoices over the bride, your God rejoices over you. It is natural, young folks. Some of you aren't thinking about marriage. Some of you won't get married for years, maybe decades. But if you do get married, I hope that the whole process, your dating is great. When you get engaged, that's a joyous time. Your marriage, your wedding day will be just unbelievable. There is so much joy, so many happy memories that flood back. But I don't want you to ever think, you know what, that's kind of the high point. It's going to be downhill from there. I'm hearing all these stories from folks and all these negative impressions about married life. No, it is normative. In fact, it's normal for you to not just rejoice in the first year of marriage or just on your wedding day, but for that to be the default setting. Now, it can't happen. Don't tell me it can't. If God, who really is wise, created the family the way he did, anything other than, different than, contrary to what he designed is not going to be good. It'll be inferior. It won't work the way that God designed this one. And I know so many people say, well, why are we having so many failed marriages? My simplistic answer to a very difficult quandary for a lot of people is, it's not God that's failed the plan, it's us that have failed our part of it. Sometimes that's a shared blame, sometimes maybe one more than the other. But the idea is, I can be happy. I think every person in a marriage, still married, ought to will. You know what? What can I do tonight to be more in love with my spouse? What do they need? What can I add or contribute to this marriage? Surely, even the strongest, whoever that might be here, whoever has the best marriage is arguably the best spouse. There is something else you can do. Don't let your thoughts be to receive the joy or to have my spouse do this for me, but no, me unselfishly do this for you. And you know what? If we're both intent on that, there's no limit to the true joy in that marriage. I've seen marriages turn around drastically. Sadly, some of those turn around from very happy to very sad. But I've even seen the very sad turn out to be the very happy and joyful, unified, where in the first few years of marriage, maybe fighting, arguments, separations. It's wonderful to see it. I think the ones that truly stick that out are the ones that have a religious, a spiritual foundation. I'm not arguing that two people that are atheists couldn't be happy in marriage and couldn't turn around a struggling marriage, but you need that basis. You need that foundation that comes from God's principles there. In Ecclesiastes chapter 9, verse 9, for those of you taking notes, now notice again, here's a reference to emotion. It's an adverb, if you will, of joy. Live joyfully. Live joyfully with the wife whom you love all the days of your life. Actually, Solomon uses a word there that's a little pessimistic. All the days of your vain life, which he has given you under the sun, all your days of vanity. For that is your portion in life and in the labor which you perform under the sun. If we had time, we'd talk about Ecclesiastes, how it's hard to understand, different than most literature. And so if you single out the germ principle of it, it is you can live joyfully all the days of your life in a marriage setting. Now, life as a whole is vain, it's empty. There'll be hard times and hardships. And by the way, Solomon's not the best advice giver, since he married not just once, but hundreds of wives. But you know, sometimes you can even learn a lot from folks who've done it wrong. I think maybe he's counseling a younger generation. Don't do as I've done. You can live joyfully. And again, God does not expect the impossible. How do you do that? How do you have a marriage that is the foundation to a happy home? In Proverbs chapter 5, 15 through 18, Solomon says, drink water from your own cistern, running water from your own well. Should your fountains be dispersed abroad, streams of water in the streets? Let them be only your own and not for strangers with you. Let your fountain be blessed, and rejoice with the wife of your youth. Rejoice with the wife of your youth. Someone says, what's Solomon talking about, this water and fountains and wells? He's using that as an analogy for a marriage relationship. Elsewhere in the book of Proverbs, he will picture adultery as the very unwise step of sharing what is to be experienced personally and privately in a very public way. You can't do that. Make up your mind as young people. I will be committed to my spouse with everything that I've got. We will be emotionally connected. We'll have that Genesis 2, one flesh marriage that God ordained, that Jesus spoke of in Matthew 19 other places. And at every level, intellectually, physically, there will be a meshing of us. There will be a means of our wanting to be together and to find, obviously, in a godly way, the highest happiness that can be found. Some spouses, a few secretly, maybe most of them, others overtly would confess that they wouldn't marry the same person again. That saddens me. I've heard people say that. Yes, I would get married again, not to him, not to her. And sometimes you understand why they would say something like that. There's a little brown church in Iowa, contrasted to the little white church that's sung about by some here, but a little brown church in Iowa, hundreds of marriages, weddings that is, performed there. And the preacher, as the bride's been kissed and they're having the processional down there, he says, now to the young lady, you have the honor of ringing the bell. That'll be the first act of your marriage. And she grabs the heavy rope and pulls on it. And it's designed that it's so heavy she can't do it by herself. She gives it her best effort, looks kind of at him like, oh no, are we really married? And the preacher says to the man, help her. Together with both of their hands on the rope, they are able to pull the rope and ring the bell. And that closing lesson for them is, as long as you're pulling together, you ring the bell. One can't do it on their own. Powerful, enduring lesson, certainly about marriage. God has designed marriage so that we are pulling together. When we pull at each other, when we are intent on pulling apart, not surprising, there's friction, there's strife, turmoil. When we pull together, great things happen. The Good Housekeeping magazine back in 1996 had a contest, a happy marriage contest. They invited any of their subscribers, any readers, send in your opinion, just open-ended, right? What's the recipe for a happy marriage? The winning entry out of 12,000 was preacher for the Talladega Church of Christ, home congregation of Sanja, by the way. This was a decade after we'd been married, but we know him. Dylan Bays, his wife Patty, submitted this winning entry. Here's what they said. By the way, they had been at the time married 27 years. Pretty simple, won't take long to read it. We gave when we wanted to receive. We served when we wanted to feast. We shared when we wanted to keep. We listened when we wanted to talk. We submitted when we wanted to reign. We forgave when we wanted to remember. We stayed when we wanted to leave. That's it. How would you like to be paid several $1,000s for that simple advice that, by the way, is rooted in what? Where do you find those principles? The Bible. I'm glad that they were able to use that as a means of maybe bringing an awareness, again, to the fundamentals, the easy things on paper, hard things in practice that will really make for a happy marriage. I like that. I'm glad out of all those entries that something that simple and yet so profound could have a lasting impression like that. Well, I mentioned the survey of married couples. Would you get married again? A lot of them say no, either not married at all or not married to this one. But you know what? That same type of question has been asked about, in fact, Ann Lander is one of those, asked of parents, would you have children again? 70% in some surveys, no. Not on your life, not what I thought it was going to be. And yet I find in Psalm 127, verses 3-5, behold, children are a heritage from the Lord. The fruit of the womb is a reward. Like arrows in the hand of a warrior, so are the children of one's youth. Happy is the man who has his quiver full of them. They shall not be ashamed, but shall speak with their enemies in the gate. We don't have big quivers anymore. We have little small quivers. Our American family is shrinking, the number of children on average that is had. But whether a lot or a bunch, God said it's a blessing. Eve says with the birth of Cain, I have gotten a man from the Lord, or with the help of the Lord. Wish we could go back and instill in the minds of America kind of across the board. It's a wonderful thing to bring a child into the world. Never let it lose its wonder. And with the challenges and the difficulties, it's worth it. In Luke chapter 1, references, starting with John the Baptist, verses 13 and 14, the angel said to them, Zacharias and Elizabeth, do not be afraid, for your prayer is heard. Your wife Elizabeth will bear you a son. You shall call his name John. It goes on to say in verse 14, you will have joy and gladness, and many will rejoice at his birth. 3 more times in Luke chapter 1, you find references to rejoicing about John's birth, Zacharias and Elizabeth, also with Mary, who will be introduced, and Jesus, in a similar way, is going to cause rejoicing. Obviously, that's important because of the roles they would play in salvation and redemption. But you know, every child's special. In Luke 2, verse 10, the angel said to the shepherds, "Do not be afraid, for behold, I bring you good tidings of great joy, which will be for all people." One of the happiest experiences as a minister for me personally is to be able to go to the hospital, and we see a lot of different folks, some of them dead and dying, some of them pretty critical. Emergency room visits aren't always too pleasant, but it's always nice to say, you know what, on this certain floor, somebody's given birth or has the new baby. Love those visits. Love to see parents just, sometimes with the first, not always, just beside themselves with the anticipation of what that's going to be. Some of you are flashing knowing smiles at that prospect as well. Where do we ever get out of the joy or of the satisfaction that simple thing can bring into life? Listen to what Jesus, a comparison he makes in John chapter 16, verse 21 and 22. He says, "A woman, when she is in labor, has sorrow because her hour has come." By the way, I'll never know what that sorrow is about. "But as soon as she has given birth to the child, she no longer remembers the anguish for joy that a human being has been born into the world." He goes on to say, "Therefore now you have sorrow, but I will see you again, and your heart will rejoice, and your joy no one will take from you." Jesus wasn't giving a lecture about childbirth. He rather is saying to apostles, dreading his leaving, not understanding why, it's like a woman suffering. She's not enjoying the labor process. Some of you ladies might be the exception, but she's looking to what lies beyond, the joy of what comes after. Jesus says, you hang on, learn a lesson from that. So many of you ladies love your children. Some of them are still young enough that you're not hearing a lot of this lesson or many lessons, and yet you're here anyway. Some of you love those children while you had them, and now they've grown up, and some of them have already had your grandchildren. Others may in the future. Some of you aren't yet even have a clue about what it might be like to be a parent or something. That's all right as well. Just understand that they're from God. And this is part of the godly process. And even with the scars and the struggles that come along with it, may we always make the correct assessment that children are a heritage from God. They're a blessing from Him. Then children. If you have children, can you have a happy home? I love it when children are happy, when they can smile, when they can express gratitude to parents. I don't know why God gave me you, but He did, and I'm thankful that you're my mom. I'm thankful that you're my dad. And I want to thank you for things that I don't often think about. The fact that you work hard to provide for me. Thank you for that new pair of shoes I got. Thank you for letting me play ball or whatever. And so many children, because of usually in an environment of acceptance and true nurture, will be able to say to parents, don't know yet what it's like to be you, but I am thankful for you. I'm even thankful for you when I don't fully understand why you're doing what you're doing. And you hand down some of those decisions I don't agree with or seemingly are making my life miserable. I'm going to trust you enough to keep doing that because you're the parent. And you're the one that God gave me to raise me. I love when children get that and are probably in a good position once they get married and grown and gone to bring up another generation like that. Don't tell me that children can't contribute to the happiness in a home. I know they can contribute to the sorrow. You look at passages like Proverbs 23, 24, and 25, where it says, the father of the righteous will greatly rejoice. Not a little bit, greatly rejoice. And he who begets a wise child will delight in him. Let your father and your mother be glad, and let her who bore you rejoice. Notice how Solomon here speaks to two different classes, to fathers, who, by the way, probably have had a part, along with that great mother, in the child being righteous and wise and finding delight out of that. But then he talks to the child. Don't you do anything to cause your parents' grief unnecessarily. You have a stake in this. Your home can be happy. Let her who bore you rejoice. What a goal that is. Proverbs 29:3, whoever loves wisdom makes his father rejoice, but a companion of harlots wastes his wealth. It's really something how that even one, say you've got a large family, maybe a huge extended family, one person is enough to just totally fragment that thing. And to make the relative happiness that could be there a pipe dream. We all have to pull together and realize the awesome responsibility. Sometimes it's not even disrespect to parents. Sometimes the brothers and sisters, I plan on doing a whole lesson on this later this year. I'll save a lot of remarks for that, but understand that God has given you that brother, that sister, that combination of several of those. And he really expects you to dwell in harmony. Not always going to like what they do. There'll be hair pulling and diary reading and stuff like that will get under your skin. But I tell you, love them while you got them. That is a great challenge for us to do. Children are a blank slate. They're open to our influence, good or bad. We are helping them write the stories that will define their life. It is so important that their story is a godly story. If your home is broken by several things, it may be several D's like divorce, desertion, maybe drug abuse. Some folks deal with distance, dysfunction in several different ways. I have hope for you. Wish I could just wave a magic wand and say, hey, all that pain you're experiencing magically, mysteriously is gone now. Don't have to worry about that anymore. I don't have a magic wand. It's not an easy answer to some of the things that people are going through, but there is hope for stability and support, serenity, and most importantly, salvation in God's family. Some people really are open to a message that's an ancient message, but a very modern one, very practical one, and that is, regardless of what your family's like, whether it's happy or unhappy or somewhere in between, regardless of your literal earthly family, God loves you and is calling you into his forever family. In 1 Timothy chapter 3, verse 15, it's called the house or the household of God, and how that we ought to behave, or God has given instructions on how we relate to one another in his family. So many images flood the pages of the Bible with that beautiful description. And you know what? Just like your earthly family that is imperfect, God's spiritual family on the human side always is imperfect. It'd be a shame if our family's strong and we come to a church setting and all of a sudden that's where a true test of our faith comes. It's hard to get along with those folks, but I'm telling you what, like in our regular families, let's pull together to be the best son and daughter of our Father we can be, and the best brother and sister. Never perfect, never arriving at that near impossible standard, but wanting to be there to support and to encourage, to mutually edify and build up in the way that we need to. How do you get into God's family? One of the short passages, one of the concise ones about that is Galatians 3:26 and 27. It mentions two of the steps in the plan of salvation. Those, namely, are faith and baptism. But it says that you are all sons of God through faith in Christ Jesus. As many of you, as were baptized into Christ, have put on Christ. In Jesus, no Jew nor Greek, slave nor free, male nor female. Some of those dividing lines in the world are just glossed over. There's a total acceptance in God's spiritual family, the church. Tonight, if you're not yet a part of it, you can be. Door's always open. And you don't have to wait to a sermon to respond. If you know the time is right to go from living a life that is characterized by being lost, engulfed in sin, to a life of salvation and holiness. Some may want to come and simply say tonight, I'm weak, I'm struggling, I need prayers. I want to be either a better family member or a better family member in God's kingdom, and I need your help. And I pledge that we will try to do that. we'll live up to the challenge of being a true spiritual family. The invitation is open. Will you come to him tonight? While together we stand and sing this song.
Hear the sweet voice of Jesus.